Hello everyone, this is Brock Skaggs, and we're going to make this video. We're going to attempt to model up this Knex part. And so I've got a few of these laying around the house. It's one of the toys that I played with as a kid. If you're familiar with Knex, you can build lots of different structures out of them, and they come with these little pieces with rods of different lengths, and then these connector pieces. And so we're going to look at this 90-degree connector piece, where you can see you can connect a rod at kind of 0 degrees here at the horizontal, a 45-degree here, and then a 90-degree there. And so looking at the part, it's a fairly complex geometry, so to speak. We'll have somewhat of an intense first sketch to get us going, but then after that there's not going to be a whole lot of features really. One could look at it and say, well, really I could probably do this in maybe 2 features if I really wanted to. I'm seeing somewhat of a boss extrude to get the thickness, and it's all kind of a constant cross section all the way across that thickness, and then I've got all these dress up rounds and fillets that are 10,000ths of an inch there to kind of smooth off all the edges there. One could do it that way. I think I'm going to break it into a little bit more smaller chunks, if you will. My kind of plan with modeling this is to model a lot of the cross section looking at the front view here, except for I'm going to take these pockets out probably. These 3 pockets that I'm going to see here, I might make that as a separate cut extrude just to simplify that initial sketch. So without getting into too much more detail in terms of the planning, let's go ahead and hop right into SolidWorks. And so I'll switch over my window to SolidWorks here. I've just got a starting part template, IPS unit system you can see here. I think there was a material on that drawing, yes, ABS, so let's go ahead and apply that while we're at it. So I'll right click on materials, go to edit material here. It's broken down by kind of categories of materials. ABS is a plastic, and right here at the very top of the list is ABS for us. So before I'm even creating any geometry, I'm going to go ahead and apply and close that. So as soon as I create my first solid body, it knows it's ABS. I'm going to assume this is the isometric view up here in the top right. And so let's go ahead and make our sketch. If we're going to try to sketch this profile, I'm going to make that on the front plane. So I'll just go ahead right here, select the sketch, and go create a new sketch from that front plane. So I guess let's take a deep breath and just start whittling away at this. First thing I'm seeing is I've got a couple circles here, kind of this complete circle here, and then I've got this circular arc going into a couple lines here, and so I'm going to start working on that. So I'll just use a right mouse gesture there to get my center point circle going. Looks like a diameter of 0.255, just to start getting us headed in the right direction. Alright, 0.255 there, and then I've got another kind of concentric circle here that I'll end up trimming some of it away, but it's offset 60,000ths there. So one way I could do that is just go to Offset Entities, click on my circle, and then say, hey, I want to offset that 60,000ths of an inch there. And so now I've got the nice start point, and I'm going to start by working on this part right here. I've got Detail View A blowing up where the rod would connect into this connector piece, and I've got all these dimensions here. And really this shape is just going to be duplicated 2 more times, right, in order to create it. So in SolidWorks, I'm hoping to define most of this geometry for this horizontal piece and then use a circular pattern to replicate that at the 45-degree angle and at the 90-degree angle. And so what I'm going to do here is just get the line tool going with the right mouse gesture again. I'm going to click on that bottom. Just notice I'm waiting until I get to that kind of lower quadrant of the circle. Start pulling off here to the right and just kind of sketching from memory what that looked like. And so I think I had a straight line. There was a little nub here, which coincided with the nub of the connector. And then I come up, over, and I'm going to stop right there because I believe the center line of where this pocket is horizontal with the center of that circle. So I'll go ahead and enforce that at this point. And so without going too much farther, I'll just see if we can dimension some of these items. First thing I'm seeing is the overall width here is 0.9375, and notice that's going from this edge here all the way to the far edge of the part, and so we'll have to use an arc condition on that dimension to achieve that. And so what I mean by that is I'll go ahead and smart dimension that. I can click this edge and click this arc, but notice by default it's snapping to the center point of the arc, and we want to go to that very left edge over there. Well, I can go ahead and accept that dimension and place it right here, but then I'm going to want to modify the properties of it. So I can just left click the dimension, explore the leaders tab over here to the left, and way down here at the bottom you can see we have arc conditions. And so arc conditions are nice when you have like a line and a circular arc or two circular arcs. You can play with the arc conditions of how it treats the circle itself. So you notice I can go to min, and this left extension line is jumping to the far right side of the circle. In this case I want max, and so it'll jump to the far left. And so this is the maximum dimension, if you will, from the edge of the circle all the way across the part, which if I look at my drawing, 0.9375 is exactly what I want to see. So I'll edit this now to be 0.9375. Alright, so notice it jumped over here and it kind of messed with my sketch, so I'm going to take a moment before I get too carried away and just kind of reorient this. See how I moved that arc and it kind of went wild there. And what I'm going to do is just basically keep that relative shape the same as I apply dimensions. One thing as I do mess with that, I noticed that, hey, now this line and this line aren't at the same vertical height, if you will. And so I can go ahead and enforce that just by clicking the two lines, getting them selected. And over here in my geometric relation selection, I want to say, hey, make those collinear there. So now just looking at the part, I noticed the distance there is 0.067, so 67 thousandths. That's this distance here. So again, the two lines here that are horizontal, oops, missed a decimal place there, didn't we? 0.067. Bring that back down. Very good. Now just kind of working my way around the part. I noticed the height there. Now if you look at this 30 thousandths of an inch dimension, we're going, I zoom in here, whoops, wrong way. Sorry about that. I'm going from the top surface of this to the top edge, or the top tangent point, if you will, of our horizontal line of that arc. And so again, we're going to have to use some arc conditions this time again. So just like last time, we go smart dimension. We reference the circle. I'm not really interested in the radius, but I want to reference relative to this line. So I'll pull it out, place the dimension, and notice immediately it tried to go from the horizontal edge to the center point there. That's not exactly what I had in mind, so I'll go ahead and click that dimension. Again, go to the leaders, and now I can explore the arc conditions. And so center is not what I want. Min, it popped the dimension over here to the left, but that does look appropriate, right? That's exactly what the model showed there. And I think it was 30 thousandths of an inch there. Yes, very good. So that's exactly what I've obtained with that arc condition. The width of that arc, 0.14, so we can go ahead and apply that here. And notice here I'm not really worried about all of the radii that have been put in here, all those rounds and fillets and so forth. I'm assuming that 0.14 goes to the virtual sharp, if you will, where that straight line and that arc would meet. So now I'm going to escape out and make sure I don't have anything selected and start pulling around on this, just kind of get a feel for what I still have left to define to make this fully defined. So looks like the positioning left to right and how far that whole thing is left and right. Looks like that whole thing is 0.33, so 330 thousandths between that line and this line. Okay, and then 57 thousandths from this left edge to the start of that arc. So it's getting a little cluttered, but hopefully we're all staying together here. Alright, so at this point I've got that all fully defined. Very nice. And so one thing I want to do is basically take this geometry that I've just worked on the lower half and mirror it to the upper half, and mirror it about basically the center of that pocket, which is basically right here. And so one thing I'm going to do to create the center is I'll go ahead and start drawing a line, and I'll just go ahead and make it snap there. I don't think I really have to eventually dimension the length of this because it's going to be a center line, but I'll go ahead and get in the habit of it and just constraining it to be vertical at that point. Now one thing about this line here is I really just want to use it as a reference, use it as a axis, if you will, to mirror about. So I'm going to come up here and say, hey, change this from that visible line to construction geometry here. And so that way it doesn't try to create that, or use that, excuse me, as an edge when I go to this boss extrude that's coming in the future. So now that I've got this nice center line or construction line here, I'm going to go up to mirror entities because we talked about mirroring a lot of this geometry. So I'm just following the prompts that SolidWorks give me. Entities to mirror, so I can just left click on the different elements here. And I could mirror about this line here. And actually I'm going to take a step back. No, I'll keep it here. One thing I'm kind of waffling on is, do I put the fillets and rounds on this sketch or go a little bit later? I'll just go ahead and keep it simple, kind of follow the KISS principle and do one thing at a time, and I'll put in all the fillets and rounds at a later point. So I'll mirror about that edge and accept that. And so now you can see we're on the right track. I've got this kind of cavity where that rod would fit into. But now I need to make duplicates of this, right? And they're going to be radially spaced around this center point here. So again, I can go up to pattern now. Instead of a linear pattern, I will be interested in a circular pattern and use that tool set. Pattern starts right here, and I usually don't think of it as far as specifying the axis. I like to hop down here and look at the entities to pattern first. And so again, for the entities, I'm just going to go through and select all these items that I just worked on, both the original and kind of the source one. And you can see that it's previewing. It's saying, hey, I want to go full 360 degrees and have 4 of them. Well, that's not really correct, right? We just wanted 90 degrees on 3 of them. So I'll come up here and say, really, I just want to go 90 degrees, and I really, I just need 3 of them. And now it's fine, except for I want it to be in the top. So I'll come up here and say change the direction of that. Okay, so that's looking good. I'll accept it. And of course now we've got some undefined objects up here, but we'll keep working on it. One thing I know is this thing closes down into here. And so that gives me that. I've got a dimension here, and notice here as I pull this down, it's actually changing the angle too as well. So that's one thing I could do, is constrain this to say, hey, that's got to be vertical there. And so now I've still got some sizing parts here. Just doing some thinking here. This line is fully constrained, and I know that's got to be the same as that line. So let's go ahead and say, hey, let's put those equal. And notice right there as I've done that, I've fully constrained that circular pattern. So we're in good shape, except for I've got these voids here, right? Void here and a void here that we need to close up. And so if we look at the drawing, zoom out a little bit here and come back to the front view, I basically need to define these edges here and here, here and here. And so this edge looks vertical, that edge looks horizontal, and these edges here are parallel and parallel there. So that'll be the keys that I'm looking for. So again, just go smart line, and I don't know exactly where they're going to meet, so I'm just going to draw them a little bit long for the first one, and then you can see I can snap back down in here. It looks like it applied that perpendicular, and that's another way of saying fine, because that line and that line are perpendicular, so if these two are perpendicular, these two will be parallel. I've got a little bit extra line to trim off, so then I'll just use power trim there to trim that guy at this point. And we'll just do the same thing down here on the lower part as well. Draw one line horizontal, get that line going, come to the intersection. Notice this time I didn't draw it in such a way that it automatically snapped perpendicular, so we'll go ahead and say, okay, if I hold control and select those two lines, I can force them now to be parallel. And then again, we've just got to trim off this excess with the power trim. Alright, so we're looking pretty good. One thing I want to do is go ahead and trim off the excess circle here. So now I've got really one big cavity. And at this point I could stop. Let's go ahead and try to put some of those fillets in here. Really, these fillets that I'm talking about, if I scroll over here to the right side again, this 20 thousandths fillets here, the 15 thousandths here, and here are the big ones that I'm interested in. So 20 thousandths here in the upper part. If I can get back, that's this one and this one. So I'm going to use a sketch fillet here. Change the radius to 20 thousandths. And click right on that point, and right on that point. Change it from a sharp point to a little bit of an arc there. So that was looking good, wasn't too painful. And now let's do the 15 thousandths, which are kind of these endpoints here. So this is where one of the ones I was kind of questioning, when do I actually do it, whether I should create it and then pattern the fillet, but I was just going to keep it simple, and we'll go ahead and apply multiple instances of the fillet at this point. So 0.015, I believe, was the radius. Yep. And I'll just go through here and click the individual ones. It's giving me a message here saying there's a midpoint relationship. We'll just have to check the geometry afterwards is basically what the indication is. Make sure nothing got messed up as I apply the fillet at this point. And it looks like everything retained its shape fairly well, so we're in good shape there. Alright, so that's all of those. And I think I'll just keep that for our first feature. So it's a little more complicated. Obviously, we've got a lot of geometric relations, all those green tags all over the place, but I think we've got a nice solid start. And so I'll go from the features, and I'll extrude it. Had that sketch active, so it pulled right in. Let's go ahead and go from the sketch plane, that's fine, but let's go mid-plane. And I believe it's 1/4 of an inch thickness. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. It's kind of white as the default appearance for the ABS. And then let's go ahead and start working on these cavities here. So we can use a cut extrude to get those cavities in place. So I'm just going to go on the front plane again, make my sketch. Go normal 2 with Control 8. And start thinking about this next sketch. So I noticed there's going to be a circle here. And that circle diameter is going to be co-radial with this guy, so it kind of blends in there. So I got that part in place. It looks like to me there's kind of these lines that are going from the center point of the circle to the center point of that fillet that we put in there, and that's kind of the middle of that little rib. Same thing here. And so let's go ahead and draw those in. Let's use construction geometry, but we can still notice how it snaps to the middle of that. Looks good. Snaps to the middle of this one as well, hopefully. There we go, yes. And so really I'm just building kind of a structure right now for myself to start creating the actual geometry that we'll use for the cut extrude. So that's looking good. And then we'll kind of focus on these up here. And let's just work on creating this geometry down here. So I know this edge, that circular arc is this arc here. But then I've got to draw this shape here. And I'm not going to worry about the fillets too much at this point. Let's go ahead and get a line tool going with the right mouse gesture. And there's like a horizontal line there. It looks like a vertical line, and then it comes back down this way. And I believe this line and this line are going to be parallel to each other. So that's good, except for now we need to get some dimensions in here. So like this rib thickness is defined right here in the detail A, 45 thousandths. So we can go ahead and click the line, and now we're using that existing edge to define its position. 0.45 there. This vertical thickness down here looks like to be the same as over here, so we could say, hey, let's make these two lines collinear. One's a line in the sketch, one's an edge. And you can see we're quickly getting to a fully defined sketch. And this guy here is also 45 thousandths. One thing we could do is define a global variable if we really wanted to, and make it hold the 45 thousandths, so we can adjust all these ribs at one time would be one possible way to do this as well. So that's looking pretty good. I guess I could really mirror it about the 45 to get this one, but I'll just kind of go through a little bit more of a brute force and simplistic method here. And we'll just draw each one of these pockets relatively quickly because all the rest of them are going to follow suit, I think, fairly closely. For instance, like these edges are going to be parallel to each other. This will also become parallel here. Whoa, what did we do? We undo. There we go. That is coincidence? No, I don't think so. If you look at this line right now, I accidentally drew it, so it thought that would be coincident there. It does not look like it's going to. So this is one of those cases where as I was drawing, SolidWorks assumed something. I thought it was helping me out by applying that geometric relation there, but I really don't want that. Okay, so check that one as well while we're at it. Alright, so that's what we wanted to make parallel. Whoops. Actually, I didn't only select in the bodies there. That's all looking good there. Notice here I can pull that out and in. I really want that to be parallel to that edge. And so we can apply it there. And so notice here as I'm just working to get that shape fairly stable. And then I can start applying the dimensions. And so in this case, I'm going to go ahead and apply the dimensions, except for here, instead of replicating that over and over again, I'm just going to reference the dimension value down here. And what do we have here? Just looking at how I dimensioned this, that's 45 thousandths all the way across. That looks fine. Those do appear to be parallel. Okay, so I'll apply this here, and again, I'm just going to reference that there. That's where I keep referencing these dimensions. It probably would be best to reference a global variable if we're going to have to deal with this model on a long-term basis. Here, I'm just kind of chaining all these together. Okay, so that looks fairly good. Just need to apply the rounds and fillets, which I'll do last, and then once more for this one over here. Notice it grabbed kind of the quadrant there, so I don't want to do that. So I'll escape out and create the sketch in a slightly different ordering. Vertical, horizontal, that's good, but this needs to be parallel to that line. Hopefully you're seeing the pattern here as I'm just continuing to whittle away. At the different elements. Alright, there's that, and this last one as well. The last one we can say again is collinear here, so we're just really replicating this same workflow. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. I've got these 3 cavities. I can do some extrude cut because I don't need all of this. Now be careful not to hit that center line. Snip out the little bits there. And we're all in good shape. There are some rounds and fillets, I believe, in here. Yeah, 20 thousandths, I believe, is all of them. So let's go ahead and try to apply those at the sketch level. Alright, so I've got my radius in place. I've got the sketch tool active, so let's just go ahead and start picking some points and see how it works. Alright, so we've got all of our parts in place there. All of our cuts, if you will, or sketches for the cuts. And so again, we got somewhat of a cluttered sketch. There's quite a bit of green geometric relation tags all over the place. This is partly why I broke the cross section into 2 different sketches, because you can only imagine if I had this and then overlay it with our previous sketch, and it'd be very, very cluttered there. And so I kind of decomposed it into 2 different sections, if you will. But I've got a nice fully defined sketch, so I'm just going to go straight into sketch 2, a cut extrude. We're on that front plane, so it's sitting kind of in the middle of the part here. So I'm not going to go blind, but I'll go through all in both directions, so it'll capture the design intent a little bit better. Okay, so it looks like we're in good shape. The next bit is just all these rounds and dress-up fillets of 10 thousandths, so I'll use a feature fillet to do that. And I'm going to try something real quick and just box select this whole thing, because I know that'll pick up quite a few edges. And you can see as I did that, my computer is going through here and grabbing all of the edges. It's probably going to tax it a little bit, so we see how it does. Did we do it? It looks like it grabbed all the edges. We're still alive, so let's just go ahead and hit the green check mark and see if we can render those. We've got an issue over here. This sometimes happens when you try to get ambitious with fillets. Please check the input geometry and ready files or try using a face fillet. Failed to create, okay. That's fine. We can kind of walk ourselves back from here. Sometimes you have to break the fillet process into multiple entities. I'm suspecting it's having trouble here. Or I may have had issues with the fillet. I don't think I set the radius. Let's actually backtrack that. So I don't remember coming down here and setting that to 10 thousandths first. So we'll go 010, we'll be brave again, box select that because I think I want to grab almost all of these edges. So as you can see, my machine's working through it, trying to grab all those edges that I enclosed in that box selection. doing its best. Hey, there we go. We got the nice yellow geometry for the preview. That's looking very nice. Exciting stuff. And we created the geometry. Very, very good. Alright, so there you have it. I'm pretty sure we're done with all the solid geometry at this point. If you're familiar with Knex, that does look like a Knex piece. You might be saying, hey, there's one extra thing, right? That they're usually not white, they're red there. So one way you could do that is, I like to do it from the Render Tools tab, so I don't have it showing, but I can go up in there, right click on any of the tabs, go tabs, and I like to show the Render Tools, and I'm working with appearances. I'll just edit the appearance, and I'd have to make a totally separate video to talk about all this, but you can select the appearance at different levels as far as granularity, the entire part, features, faces, but I'm going to do it the entire part and just want to make it that bright red. There we go. Alright, so there you have it. That looks like a Knex part to me. And so I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It's a little bit more complex part, maybe a little more intimidating at the beginning, but notice how we just kind of broke it down into individual pieces and then focused on the sketches of those pieces, kind of build ourselves up and kind of pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, so to speak there. And so we'll take away kind of don't be intimidated by the initial geometry, but just start working on breaking it down into just smaller and smaller problems, and then you're solving those up individually in kind of a hierarchy fashion to arrive at your end geometry.